Well, here we are, live from Washington, D.C. There's the Washington Monument, the American flag in Washington, and the street below. How you guys doing? I don't want to take long tonight for the broadcast. We had an excellent meeting at the press club today. I tried to get you in, but I couldn't get Periscope to work on my phone. Sorry, I tried. I think maybe it was the security, but we weren't supposed to Periscope anyway. But some of the stuff was really worth noting. It's been a long day, but let me give you some thoughts. The purpose of the meeting was to gather together Lou Engle and Cindy Jacobs. I already knew, and they were there, and it was really great. Frank Immediate convened the meeting, and Bishop Clarence McClendon contributed. There were other speakers too. I'm not trying to give you a list of everybody that was there. But the main agenda was a free flow of prophetic intercession for the Trump transition, for the protection of the family, for the inauguration. And then different issues such as racial healing in America, the immigration, and we had different speakers that were really experts on those subjects or had great perspectives that shared what they had to say. One of the main ideas that I thought was interesting, there's like 7 points that I would love to share with you, but I'll just give you like 2 of them, is that where we are right now is a window that this isn't really, and in a sense, I know Kat Kerr and others have prophesied, oh, Trump's going to win, he's going to serve for 2 terms, then Mike Pence. And I personally think that that's not, I won't say it's not accurate, but I'll say it's not actually helpful. Because what it does is it diminishes the fragile nature of the transition that's happening and creates a false sense of security. My biggest concern is we only have 24 months before congressmen are up for re-election, so what the president does is going to be singularly impacting on the balance of power in the Congress. And it often happens that when a president comes in, that the balance moves against them in the next election. I'm telling you, the left is hell-bent on destroying Donald Trump and impeaching him. You could see by this ugly and ridiculous charade of going on with the media about prostitutes that he brought into a bedroom that Michelle and Barack Obama were in Moscow, and having them urinate on the bed in some perverse act. I mean, for this kind of graphic, unsubstantiated intelligence to be brought into the media means that it was leaked out from the intelligence community. It's when we say unsubstantiated, I mean, I can make up any kind of grotesque story about President Obama right now and say, of course, it's unsubstantiated. But he ate Henry Kissinger for dinner last week, and Henry hasn't been seen since then. I mean, it could be stupid like that. The point is, I mentioned Henry because some of you are so obsessed with Henry Kissinger for some reason. But the point that I'm making is that the media is continuing to do its lynch job on the credibility of Donald Trump, and then when Donald Trump pushes back on them, of course, they're like adolescents. They're having a meltdown, a hissy fit, and saying this is so unpresidential. He's just not acting like a president. And the idea of having a prayer shield for him is really important. The idea that we should securely just say, oh, well, he's going to be in and he's going to be there, and America's going to be recovering financially, and we're going to have 2 terms of Trump and 1 term of Pence, I think is really dangerously presumptuous. I think if the church doesn't continue to mobilize in prayer, and mobilize actually electorally, so that those congressmen that are going to come under pressure from activists on the left, so that they don't know that there's a people standing behind them. This has to be more than just a Trump movement. This has to be a movement for a directional shift in the United States of America. And it's going to be a grassroots movement. I don't have to tell you, most most ministries are not interested in becoming controversial over politics, because it's kind of like no CEO wants to become controversial. Why? Because you never gain business by becoming controversial, but you always lose it. So, without impugning ministry in general, most pastors, when I was pastoring, I was trying to eschew controversy. And so it's going to have to be a grassroots Christian movement that is going to have to rise up, and there's no mechanism in place right now to do that. There's no organization to do that. And this is kind of like a matter of concern, because the left is always self-organizing, from Code Pink to LGBTQ organizations to Black Lives Matter. There's $100 million worth of Ford Foundation funding, George Soros with his millions of dollars. I mean, these are people that are actually paid to create incidents like the insane clown posse that showed up during the Jeff Sessions hearings with the Ku Klux Klan garments on, and then the media cycle with the prostitutes urinating on a bed in Russia with Trump supposedly bringing people in. Anyone that knows Donald Trump knows that one of his big phobias about running for election was having to shake hands. I know this for a fact, that he had to get over that, and just has to, because he's shaking hands and run for office, but he personally would prefer a fist bump because he's germophobic. I mean, he's not as bad as Howard Hughes, but some billionaires are eccentric that way. So, like he said in the press conference, if you caught it, as much as I am about germs, the idea of me having this kind of an event happen is perverse and it's stupid. And so, but notice that the outrage isn't over the pornographic nature of the intelligence communities creating, inserting this kind of crazy story into a briefing and saying this is the kind of information that could possibly be used by Putin if it was found. For that to be in the briefing shows that the Obama administration, and Trump's after them, Central Intelligence appointments that have been done for the last 8 years, are deeply sympathetic to undermining the presidency. And for Donald Trump to take on the intelligence community is the boldest and most dangerous step that any president could take, because these people are by their very nature, CIA and that stuff, they could really screw with you in terms of the information you're getting and stuff. So we're going to have to pray for a real cleansing of the house and exposure. Now, I've said all along that Isaiah 45 is the verse that the Lord gave me for Donald Trump, which is the Cyrus call of the anointed Cyrus, would be the 45th president. Now, I want to also share that Psalm 45 is the prayer we're going to pray. And Psalm 45 says that your right hand will discover your enemies and your arrows will be sharp in the hearts of the king's enemies. We're going to have to pray for God's hand to expose those forces and factors in government and in media and in the intelligence community that would be working in collusion with an agenda to undermine the success of the presidency. That, to me, is more of a story than them obsessing about Russia. The truth of the matter is 84% of evangelicals showed up and voted in for Trump. They don't want to think that this was an act of faith in a Christian community, so they'd much rather blame it on Putin. But Putin did not affect the electoral vote. James Comey doing his expose on Hillary Clinton and taking the case back in is being investigated again by the left, because they're desperate to try to find a way to delegitimize Trump's victory by saying it was the FBI or it was Vladimir Putin. Lord help them, they don't want to talk about the church and Jesus. We know that. So the fact of the matter is that the meeting at the press club today was about how to raise a prayer shield over the president and over the agenda, which includes and incorporates immigration, and it includes being able to get reinvigoration in the inner city and the African American communities. It was very interesting as the anointing was very strong, as the Lord prophetically was speaking to us as we prayed about an entrepreneurial renaissance in the black community that was going to bring investment in. I remember Kim Clement had said that Trump would be a trumpet and that Bill Gates would be a gate of prosperity for, I think he said, the inner cities. And so I'll have to check that out, but it was something like that Gates would be a gateway for prosperity. And I believe that it's very possible that there'll be a renaissance and a breakthrough in the inner cities in terms of entrepreneurial activity, And of course, nothing that works for Trump will be celebrated, sorry to say, by the left, because America's an is an unusual structure. I listened to the CEO of Pensacola, a really dynamic woman who was being interviewed by Charlie Rose or something, and she was asked, "Would you ever consider running for public office, like what you've done with Pensacola as a woman?" I think she's a Hispanic, maybe woman, or Indonesian background. I believe she's American, but I think her background was ethnic. And and they asked her and said, "Would you ever consider, political office?" She said, "Oh my gosh, can you imagine?" Now I want you to think about this. Can you imagine being the CEO of a company like Pepsi-Cola, and the day that you become the CEO, 50% of the board of directors and the employees are out to sabotage you, defeat you, or block your success? She said no company in the world could survive if 50% of the executives and 50% of the employees were succeeded by you failing. She said, "I don't know how in the world government ever works, because it's not really based on collaboration for the common good. It's based on overcoming the opposition and defeating them." And it's that dysfunction in government that 75% or 70% of Americans say government isn't working. That's what we all have in common. Now, on the extreme left or the extreme right, you're going to have people that want to destroy the other side. I think Christians are the only rational people that I know of as a group whose belief system is actually based on the fact that we're interested in heaven on earth. We're interested in everyone winning. We're interested in everyone succeeding. We don't want winners and losers. But unfortunately, that's not the world you're in. There are people that want you to lose. And there are other countries, that have principalities and powers. When you listen to, what about China doing this and going out into the sea and creating these islands and militarizing them, or Russia militarizing the Arctic regions outside of the American territory. I'm sorry to say that these principalities and powers are real. They influence fallen humanity. And the church in every nation has to rise up. My conversation today with this group was, let's not look at single issues like abortion or immigration or this or that, or the Supreme Court even. Let's say those are individual issues that are spokes connecting to a hub, and the hub is the unity of the body of Christ coming together and engaging the transformation of nations in a far more muscular way, and actually getting into the soil, and putting our hands into the soil of culture and going to work. And that sheep nations is the outcome that Jesus wants. And that means nations that are basically nations that allow for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, due process, courts that are untampered, transparency in government so that there's no private normant of wealth at the expense of people, transparency in government transactions, a press that is able to speak the truth and not be afraid or under the control of propaganda instruments. Think about this. I'm giving you 5 or 6 characteristics of what a functional democracy is, because whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not, democracy is the outgrowth of a biblical worldview that gives the maximum amount of freedom to people with the greatest potential for prosperity and flourishing. There's no country in the world that's been able to do what the United States has done. There's no culture in the world that has been able to outperform what England has done, and we got a lot of our foundation basically from England. Remember, we left Great Britain in a revolution, but Great Britain has shaped us because of its system of laws and its system of its discipline of ownership and its sense of ethic and morals that basically allowed us with awakenings to cast off the yoke of what we felt was taxation without representation. But I don't want to go into a history lesson here. The main thing I want to say is that the Apostle Paul prayed